Hey everybody, KC here. So there was an interesting story in the New York Times the other day about a fellow named Dr. Bob Ross. And he is a Minnesota physician who's been basically taking care of the residents of Ortonville, Minnesota since 1977, right? He has delivered babies, watched them grow into adulthood, delivered their children, and now he's watching them as they age and taking care of them as they age. And he's aging along with them. The hook of the New York Times story was he was looking at the presidential race and saying, both these guys are older than I am. And frankly, I've lost a step or two. And that was the political prism of the story. But let's put the politics aside for a second. Dr. Ross reminded me of Moonlight Graham in some ways. I don't know if you remember Moonlight Graham from Field of Dreams. He was played by Burt Lancaster in the movie. And he was a guy, former baseball player, who found that his true calling, his true passion was as a doctor taking care of all the people in this little town. Like every town should have a Moonlight Graham. But what bothered me about the story was some advice he gave to this aging patient who was asking him about diet. And he told her the things she should eat and the things that she shouldn't eat. And then he used this sentence, and this sentence really bothered me. He said, if it tastes good, spit it out. If it tastes good, spit it out? I don't think so. I think life is both too short and too long to not really enjoy foods that taste good. And listen, I'm not just talking about breakfast burritos and seafood risotto here. There's a lot of fresh foods that are healthy for you and also taste good. Like a great tomato to me is, it's the best. Or a really fresh cucumber. Now for me, things like lettuce and kale, they're never going to make the list. To me, they're kind of like filler, unless, of course, they're drenched in salad dressing, which kind of defeats the purpose. But I recognize for a lot of people, spinach and kale and lettuce, those are the things that really light their fires. Listen, sometimes there are things, I like the flavor of apples, but for some reason, apples give me a little scratchy throat. I must have some kind of allergy, and I've never been able to figure out how to eat raw apples without really having it affect my throat, so I don't eat them. The good news is I can eat apple pie because cooked apples don't have that effect on me. And if I have an apple pie and it's got like a nice thick, warm slice of apple pie with vanilla ice cream and maybe caramel swirl that's sort of melting over it, that's my idea of heaven. I may have a problem here. Anyway, I was once talking to a doctor in town, and he's sort of a physician he's very strict, and he has certain mandates about what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat and things like that. And he once said to me, he said, Kevin, you can drink wine if you do things my way. He goes, I drink wine. He goes, I'll actually have a glass of wine every month or two. Every month or two. We are living on different planets. That's all I can say. Listen, one of the great things about the food industry, the terrific thing that the food industry does that nobody else does, is you feed people, right? You nurture people, you nourish people. And if you focus on that part of the business, you could be transformational. You can have an enormous impact on people's lives. Yes, products can be healthy for you. Products can be good for you. But sometimes you just have to indulge. You have to enjoy products that just, they send you over the moon. Listen, there's an old line that if you can only eat the things that are good for you and you'll live forever, but it's going to feel like forever. And that doesn't sound particularly interesting to me. Listen, I want to have a long and happy and productive life. And I recognize I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning, but I want to enjoy food. Granted, I'm a person who lives to eat, not doesn't just eat to live. Food is very important to me. I love the process of cooking and eating and enjoying it with friends. And I want it to be flavorful and tasty. And I don't necessarily care if it's always healthy. I think indulgence is actually good for the soul, even if it isn't always good for one's arteries. Listen, if it tastes good, I'm going to want seconds. But in the interest of longevity, I'll limit myself to firsts. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this morning. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.